this brings us over to some pretty wild stuff from California. So after claiming that Republicans are incredibly corrupt and they're ruining elections and they're destroying the will of the people, California, which has a jungle primary system, simply says, hey, if you have 5 Democrats running and you have 2 Republicans running for the election and everyone goes to vote in the primary, we're going to put them all in the same bucket. And then the top 2 vote getters, because no one would vote Republican, so it's probably going to be 2 Democrats. That's what the California Assembly people said when they were getting the bill forward. They said, look, if there are only 3,000 people come out to vote for the Republican, then they should not get to be on the main ballot in November when you have 2 Democrat candidates who have 100,000 and 50,000 votes. Only one of those 2 gets to be on there. And so then they stamped it into law, and they're like, that's what we're going to do. And then it turned out that a lot of the California candidates that are running for governor are awful, and there are also a kaflibbity-jillion of them. And so, a couple of those together, you have Steve Hilton and then Sheriff Chad Bianco, who are running for governor on the Republican side. And there's a non-zero chance, we reported on it at least for a month here on the Tony Kinnett cast, that you could end up seeing the Republicans get first and second place in that election, which would mean that in the general in November, it just functions as a runoff election, you would have 2 Republicans to choose from as governor for the state of California. Now, all of these Democrats, from Gavin Newsom to Kamala Harris to Barack Obama to Abigail Spanberger to Zoran Mamdani to Justin Pearson in Tennessee to AOC, they've all been claiming that the will of the voters is supreme. And you can't just like be messing with elections. Well, you know, Gavin Newsom says, well, if we have 2 Republican candidates, well, there are contingencies. We have plans to change the rules if that's the case.
We all have agencies. We can shape the future. There's still a lot. Look, I've said this before, so I'll repeat it. I don't anticipate this need to be the case, but there is a break the glass scenario. And
you endorsed the open primary system. You, Gavin, you were so confident, so cocksure that all you had to do was just have a system where the top 2 candidates of all of them got their people through. And you'd probably have, you know, a corporatist Democrat and then a Bernie Sanders kind of socialist Democrat. And then they would run together because they would get way more votes than the Republican who has his thumb up his behind. And then you would elect a wonderful winner and everyone would be happy. So you'd only have to put those 2 Democrats on the ballot. It turns out, again, Democrats really freaking suck at running California. And so now when it turns out the will of the people may put the sheriff and Steve Hilton up at the top of the ballot for a runoff in November. So again, because if it's a runoff situation, which by the way, I hate jungle primaries. I hate them. I despise them. I don't think that they should be the way things are done. I also hate ranked voting because I think that disenfranchises more people than it benefits. But let's play it out. Let's game it out here. You, me, and Dupree. So in this instance, if you have a jungle primary system and the Republicans and independents in California, because anyone can vote in the California primary for anybody. So if a lot of people pick Steve Hilton, and then a second number of people who don't necessarily have an R next to their name, then pick Chad Bianco, well, then don't those people then get to decide, the 2 biggest groups of people in California get to decide whether they want person number 1 or number 2 in November? But he immediately, again, for all of the rhetoric from this man that Trump was going to use the National Guard to end the midterms and end the election, from this man specifically said, Trump's rhetoric was dangerous. He has announced that if the very rules set by California's Democrat Assembly, its own Democrat supermajority state government, if California can't keep the Republicans from being spot number 1 and 2 on the ballot again because they ran 14 different people, 5 of whom are just a euphemism for gonorrhea. I mean, like the California candidates for governor are awful. Katie Porter, who is downright abusive. Xavier Becerra, who just pretends that Gavin Newsom was wonderful and you need to double down on him. You have Tom Steyer, who says, I'm a billionaire, but I want to get your money, not my money. And then the other random guys that are some kind of an awkward mix between Pete Buttigieg, James Tallarico, and Jacob Frey, with about enough testosterone, maybe to give one teenage boy 1 chest hair. Right, that's your candidates. And they can't figure out, they don't want to drop out because, again, they all have an ego that is so enormous that in an age of Donald Trump, I'm having a trouble coming up with an analogy. We got to break it all, though, if Republicans get ahead.
before, so I'll repeat it. I don't anticipate this need to be the case, but there is a break the glass scenario. And there's many people that have a deep understanding of what it would look like if Democrats were locked out. And
They're not locked out, though. They're not. And I've said this I said this actually, this is a funny story. So in my own congressional district here in the state of Indiana, all right, Greg Pence retired, or he was going to retire, and then I accidentally broke that news because, whoops. And so then every single Republican and their cousin got into the 6th congressional primary here in Indiana. And there was a guy who ended up winning named Jefferson Shreve, who was running also for this district. He just lost a mayoral election in Indianapolis. And then literally everybody joined in. And it was like a Smash Brothers commercial. Everyone was like running for election. And I said at the time, if you run like 5 of these people, all of the exact same proposals, they're all the same people. And I talked to them. I went down to this Shelbyville event, and I almost shook one of them by his Patagonia vest. And I said, dude, if you don't drop out, you're going to split the vote, and the guy that I don't want to win is going to win. And guess what happened? Exactly that. Democrats and Republicans, guys, it is, believe it or not, if you are dumb enough to run 556 people for a primary and split the vote, King Solomon style, I don't know what to tell. I don't know if there's any help for you. But rigging the election and like shoving additional people on the ballot is not necessarily the way that I would do it. But voter fraud, again, that's just the California way. The California woman who was federally charged with paying individuals, including the homeless, on Los Angeles Skid Row to register to vote, has now pled guilty and is going to be sentenced to prison for, again, given that it's California, a good 15 minutes.